When you need a lawyer, how do you find the right one? Contact the Chicago Bar Association.
Whether you've been injured or need a will prepared, whether you're buying a home or starting a business, having the right lawyer is essential. The Chicago Bar Association have lawyers who practice in most areas of law and speak a variety of languages.
Don't leave it to chance. Get a referral to a screened, experienced lawyer. Visit chicagobar.org or call 312-554-2001. The Chicago Bar Association. Se habla español.
Welcome to You and the Law, a Chicago Bar Association production that provides information on a variety of legal and policy matters of public interest. I'm Mike L. Krocke, a partner at Plaintiff's Personal Injury and Medical Malpractice firm Leahy & Hosty, LLC. I'm an adjunct professor at Loyola Law here in the city and a member of the Chicago Bar Association. On today's show, we're going to dig into current developments in immigration law and policy, an area that is quite literally changing by the day right now. And we're lucky to have with us two great guests for this new format that we're trying out right now, which is a Zoom or virtual production. We'll see how it goes. Thanks, Ricardo, for helping us out with this one. I want to introduce the guests. Asim Cunningham is a managing partner and co-founder of Cunningham Lopez, LLP, a Chicago law firm that focuses on immigration. Alexandra Lopez is likewise a managing partner and co-founder of Cunningham Lopez LLP. And she, along with Asim, counsel and guide clients through this complex and often very daunting area of law on a daily basis. It is worth noting that Asim and Alexandra are also husband and wife, and they can tell us a little bit more about that, their individual backgrounds and their practice as we move on to the show. Alexandra, why don't you start us off? Give us a little bit of background about you and your practice.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you for having us on today. Yes, as you mentioned, I am a co-managing partner of Cunningham Lopez here in Chicago, along with my husband and partner and in law, Asim. I oversee our immigration practice at Cunningham Lopez. This is an area of law that is very personal to me, as I am an immigrant myself. I'm originally born in Spain, and so this is a process that I had to go through as well as my mother. And so it is not only personal, it's also very stimulating because, as you said, it is changing by the day. And so being an immigration attorney right now is exciting, for lack of a better word.
Sure. And Asim, can you follow up on that, please?
Yes. So I am a partner with my wife, who I'm married to an immigrant. And so for that reason, amongst others, it's a very important subject of law for me as well.
All righty. Well, let's dig into the subject matter because there's a lot. And I think what we're going to try to do here is provide a little bit of a primer or background on immigration law, because I think in order to really understand what's happening now, and I certainly don't claim to, which is why I appreciate the benefit of being able to talk to folks like you, it's important to understand the basics so we can understand what the issues of controversy are and what the changes that happen so quickly mean against the backdrop of the legislative just the background of the entire area of law. So can you tell us a little bit, can you give us a quick intro to immigration law? And I know that's probably a lot, but if you can break it down at sort of a starting point, that would be very helpful. Either one of you can take the lead.
I'll jump in here. So Mike, you're not alone in feeling like you aren't an expert in this area of law, because immigration is one of those areas where the changes come so frequently that we never feel like we're experts. But to kind of give you like a basis, the immigration law is kind of based off of the Immigration and Naturalization Act. And under the act, there's two types of people. There are citizens and there are non-citizens, also referred to in the act as aliens. And within that category of non-citizens, you are either an immigrant or a non-immigrant. Immigration law is about finding or checking off the boxes for a basis for which you can have a presence here in the United States as a non-immigrant or as an immigrant. This isn't necessarily a legal term or a legal categorization, but here at Cunningham Lopez, how we categorize it is in four big boxes, basically, for how you would have a presence. So either your employer is going to help you out and you'll have a basis through them. They can apply in some way for you to have a status. If you're an investor, you're going to inject some sort of economic benefit to the United States. There's a means for you. If you have family that wants to, if there's a family unit there, there's a basis there. And then there are humanitarian reasons, more or less. So within those four big boxes, there's always, think of it, there's always some type of quid pro quo where there's a benefit to the United States. So for the employer, we want to have the best talent for the best industries, and we want to have, be able to kind of cultivate any profession in any way that we can. So if you have an expertise in a particular field, there's a route there. With respect to the investors, there are visas that are available, or if you are going to create jobs or infuse income or money into the economy, then there may be a grounds there. And there's obviously a strong preference in the United States to protect familial units of United States citizens and legal permanent residents. And then the other category I had mentioned, the other box, is humanitarian reasons, such as one of the more popular ones is asylum. Another one that may be popular, but some people may not know about it, is the U visa. So U visa, for example, is a visa that's available if someone has been the victim of a crime in the United States and they have assisted a legal agency in investigating that crime.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you mentioned asylum, and that's something that I think we, not just lawyers, but the general public, hears about a lot, and I don't know that we always hear about it put in a context that explains to us procedurally how that happens. Can either one of you, and Alex, why don't you jump in here, tell us a little bit about the role of asylum as a basis or one of the sub-bases for immigration status changes?
Sure. So asylum law has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. Even within the last 6 months, there have been a lot of changes. Essentially, asylum is an avenue for people to seek relief in a third country where they are fleeing persecution based on, a particular social group or category. And without going into too much detail, there are two main ways in which someone can seek asylum. So one is an affirmative application, in that an individual entered the U.S. With inspection or lawfully, and then they are now affirmatively seeking asylum, or in a defensive manner for removal proceedings. Either way, these are generally applications that are submitted while here in the U.S.
Can I stop you there for just a second?
Sure.
Procedurally, in terms of asylum, does the individual claiming asylum as a basis for an immigration status change, can they do that outside the country, or do they actually have to be here in the country to do so?
Yeah, so generally this is, well, that's a good question, because there have been recent agreements, for example, with third countries that are actually forcing refugees to seek asylum in those third countries before they're able to do that in the U.S. So in theory, if you are seeking asylum in the U.S., you are here in the U.S. submitting what is called an I-589 application to either an immigration court or an administrative agency. However, as recently as, I don't know if it was November or December 2019, I think it was November 2019, a asylum co-op agreement was entered into with Guatemala, where individuals from Honduras and El Salvador actually are required and are being sent to Guatemala to seek asylum there before they're able to do so here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. How much of this, and I think we're going to be coming back to this on a fairly frequent basis in the show today, but how much of this depends on the current administration? And I'm not specifically, I'm talking about the one we have right now, but just whoever's current. And also, is this the kind of stuff that can change day to day based on executive order or changes in policy?
Yes. So most of it relies on the administration, and that is because most of the asylum law and procedure and practice is carried out by the executive branch. And so these are appointees, of course, by whoever is in office at the time. And I think a common misconception is that, for example, the immigration courts are a part of the judicial branch of government, right? And they are, in fact, not. They're part of the executive branch, and they're the Department of Justice. So
let's take a step back for a second. I apologize to interrupt you, but the thing that you just touched on, for lawyers, I think it's once you point that out, generally speaking, lawyers seem to probably appreciate the distinction you just made. For folks who may not be familiar with it, what's the import of that? And I do realize, by the way, that you could write a law review article on the distinction and break it down for everyday folks to sort of understand, but that seems fairly important.
Sure. And, I think any of us could talk about this, right? And the balance and the importance of separation of powers. And Asim, I'm sure you have a lot to say about it because you generally have a lot to say on big overarching policy and whatnot. But it is really important, right, to have a separation of powers and a checks and balances. So while these three branches of government exist just for that purpose, and so now we have a court that is administrative in nature. And so while there are, of course, ways to get cases appealed to the judicial branch and to the federal court level. Generally speaking, removal proceedings, which most attorneys and certainly I think lay individuals view as judicial proceedings, are actually carried out by the executive branch.
So just to kind of piggyback off of that, and not to be a constitutional geek, because I am by no means an expert in our Constitution, unfortunately. If you think, the Constitution says that Congress shall enact, yet the executive branch may manage the treaties that our country has with others. Those relationships between who we accept and who we don't onto our grounds, onto our soil, and on what grounds is somewhat in the purview of the president, and to some extent there are laws that can be passed. And so oftentimes you could look back and there's a trend where there's an attempt to pass laws that set immigration policy through the legislature. However, the president always has the ability through its executive power and to be able to manage treaties, where if the legislature doesn't necessarily take it where they want or as far as they want their policy, then they can enact that executive power. And so because there's that division there, the president has a lot of power to make changes to our immigration policy very quickly through executive power. And so what we've seen for quite some time over the last couple of administrations is a lot of changes that have taken place with respect to immigration law that weren't necessarily enacted by the legislature.
Sure. So what I'm hearing, to sort of break it down just along a very particular point, is that it seems to me, and I'm really more asking than saying this, but that immigration is a hot button issue to begin with politically. Certainly, we hear about it all the time. Just as a matter of policy, I think it's law and policy. It's something that certainly there's a lot of controversy about. But it sounds like part of what fuels that is the degree to which the executive branch can, at its whim, make modifications that have major implications for people throughout the country, and of course, in other countries. And that's a lot that can change super fast, it seems like, right? Part of that, so I guess that's not so much of a question, it's more of a statement, but I want to take it here, and this is a question. Can you tell us, can you tell us what it's like, or what is it like, I should ask, to be working with clients, and I'm sure you get them from all walks of life, but clients who already maybe aren't so sophisticated as to just the culture here to begin with, and then they have to navigate this very complex and ever-changing, quickly changing area of law. I mean, I'd imagine that could be complicated and highly emotional, because a lot's at stake for a lot of these people and families that you're representing.
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing is to be unsure of how we can guide our clients, right? Because I often find myself telling my clients, listen, this is what it is right now, but we don't know. I can only kind of counsel you based on what the law and the procedure is right now, but it is subject to change, and that can work both ways, right? So for some people that can be a good thing, because that means that a lot of the interim or the final rules that have been issued by the Department of Homeland Security can be changed by future rules and future administrations that might open up avenues that aren't available to individuals right now. However, it's also frustration, because even though someone 6 months ago might have qualified for asylum, there's a strong chance that now, based on all of the policy memos that have been issued and final rules that have been issued, that a lot of people who qualified 6 months ago or a year for asylum no longer do. And of course, we can't control that. And
Sure.
And it is, you do find yourself in a tough position of not being able to do as much for your clients as you'd like, and not having any control over that.
Sure.
100% situation of where we have to play the cards that were dealt, and from one hand to the next, those cards may be different. And we try, and when you're working with people in these situations where immigration can be a slow moving process legally, you meet someone in the first year of helping them out, and there's one hand of cards that we have, and then a few changes are made to the policy, and that may benefit them or hurt them. And, you just have to be mentally in a place where you can deal with those changes as they come.
Sure. Let me ask you, and that sort of dovetails a bit into this next issue that I wanted to ask you about, which is, it's fairly recently. I think it was a few weeks ago, and it may be a week or so before the show was out or aired. But there's a case that got a lot of attention, a Supreme Court case. It was Department of Homeland Security and others versus Regents of the University of California. And of course, one of the things that was noteworthy, without digging into the opinion, this was more sort of a little bit of the coverage on it, which did handle the opinion, and there was a lot of coverage of that too. But Chief Judge John Roberts authored the majority opinion. I think it was a 5-4 majority that he wrote. And there was and of course, this isn't a political show, but when we talk about immigration and policy, and the two are so related, and we just discussed the extent to which the executive branch can modify it, just sort of in real time. There was part of the discussion with it. Well, Trump appointed Roberts, and there was this expectation apparently that Roberts would always, not always, but be tending to, support Trump. And that was a lot of what the, in terms of this executive order too, or this executive, act, in a basic sense, I should say. But what is that case all about? What's the controversy from a legal standpoint? How does it affect things, if it does at all? It's very hard to tell exactly, as you mentioned. And is the decision consistent with what you expect, or is there no such expectation? Because it's very hard to know these days. That was not the most succinct question, but I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Certainly expectations are out the window. I think for a lot of immigration attorneys right now. So I certainly didn't have any expectations one way or the other. I certainly was, I think, along with a lot of immigration attorneys, pleasantly surprised at the decision. This, for people who don't kind of know anything about it, is basically a ruling that the rescission of the DACA program that was launched in 2012 under the prior administration, a decision saying that rescission was not done properly for basically administrative reasons. There wasn't really much opinion on the policy of DACA or the substance of it. It's more so the way in which DACA was rescinded, right, was done improperly. Practically speaking, however, it hasn't had as positive of an effect yet as people might think, or the public might think, because certainly it was huge news that, yay, DACA's back. During this period, for the most part, individuals who were protected under DACA, and it might be helpful to even talk about what DACA is.
I was going to ask, but I didn't want to interrupt you. It would be good to get a little foundation.
So DACA was enacted in 2012 by the Department of Homeland Security, basically, in essence, to protect individuals who had been brought over as minor children to the United States, otherwise what would be considered unlawfully, and who were here undocumented. And there certainly requirements that needed to be met, such as...
So quick questions. I apologize. Sorry about that. But DACA, it's an acronym for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA. That's what that acronym is, correct?
Right.
And that's what you're discussing. Go ahead.
Yes. And so that was a memo issued by the Department of Homeland Security that basically enacted protections for certain individuals. It doesn't, I think a big misconception about it is that it actually granted individuals who qualify for DACA a legal status. And that's not the case. It basically is saying we're deferring removing you or seeking removal from the United States. So you can stay here, but not necessarily with a legal status. But you might get a work authorization and for a social security number in order to work lawfully. Okay.
So, Sim, I don't know if you have anything to add on that. I do have some follow-up questions, but if you want to provide a little bit more background or your own take on any of this, feel free.
Well, I think that DACA in particular is a perfect example of where there's an attempt by the executive branch to make change to immigration policy through the legislature. And when things don't go in the direction that the executive branch may want things to go, executive power is exercised. So many people also misconstrue the DREAM Act with DACA. And with respect to that, the DREAM Act was proposed legislation. It did not pass through Congress. And as a result, the president was able to take affirmative steps through executive power. And that is why we have DACA.
Well, let me stop you there for just a second. So the DREAM Act, which was legislation that did not pass or did not become law, that's an acronym, DREAM, for Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act, right?
Yes.
So when So there's been a lot of talk for a while about so-called dreamers, which is interesting because it's a reference to, and we think we have a general understanding of what that means sort of culturally, but legally, that is a reference to a piece of legislation that is not enacted, right?
Correct.
Right. So, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to provide a little bit of context there. And so when we talked about dreamers, and now we're going a little bit off, but you can bring it back home however you see fit. When we talk about dreamers, who are we talking about?
When we're talking about dreamers, we're talking about the children of undocumented residents who came here, technically without a basis under the Immigration and Naturalization Act, and now they're here. And DACA or dreamers are people who have been afforded some type of relief, as Alex was explaining now, where they are not subject to removal.
Right. The easiest way is immigrants who were brought here as children.
Understood. So I want to switch gears a little bit, because I suspect you'll be able to tie this together to a degree. So one of the things that I'm doing here, and I realize I'm bouncing around a little bit, but there's so much coming out every day. And by the time, and Alex, when we talked even before this, I mean, you had referenced by the time this comes out, which is not going to be a long time. Even if it's a week or 2 weeks, there could be significant or even drastic changes. But I do want to ask you about something that I think happened, or at least came up in the news yesterday or the day before, which is the Trump administration, or Trump's new census policy memo and its relationship to the 14th Amendment. I mean, in simple terms, what is going on there? So, I can be more specific if you need me to, but that's basically my level of sophistication on this issue at the moment.
Well, the new census policy more or less precludes undocumented residents from being considered as a part of the census calculation. It is hard, as you stated earlier, Mike, to separate immigration from politics. And this is one of those topics where it kind of illustrates that problem. For some of those, the states with high populations of undocumented residents, such as California, New York, Florida, Illinois, they also have, this can have implications with respect to electoral college delegates. I was doing a little bit of digging on the policy, and between the top 6 states with the most undocumented residents, California, Florida, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and Texas, that accounts for about 177 electoral college votes.
Sure.
That's significant.
So we could definitely see how it is. And I need to, we're running out of time here. It moves pretty quick and there's so much to cover, but I think we can leave it at this for now, which is, first of all, thank you both for appearing. This stuff is very important. There are a lot of folks out there who understandably, are concerned about this and affected directly by that. So I would encourage them, of course, to reach out to people like yourselves who can navigate them through this very, complex and challenging and highly personal for a lot of people area of law. And, as always, we'd like to thank our viewers. Thanks for tuning in to You and the Law. And I do think we might be remiss if we didn't say a word about beloved local legend and true Chicago TV personality, Jerry Taft, who passed. Rest in peace to him, and condolences to his friends and family. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Sim, Alex, thank you very much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Mike.
Our pleasure.